The marketplace was never meant for mercy. It was meant for spectacle. And tonight, as storm clouds gathered like an army above, the spectacle was her. She stood at the edge of the crumbling Roman square, half hidden behind broken columns streaked with moss and time. Her breath tore through her chest, shallow and ragged, every inhale burning as though her ribs might shatter under the weight of it. The sky above rumbled, swollen with thunder, black as the judgment she could feel pressing down on her. The air was thick with the smell of wet stone, blood, and fear. Not just her fear, though it clung to her like a second skin, but the collective hunger of the crowd pressing closer, circling her like vultures who knew they had already won. They wanted to see her fall. They wanted her broken, stripped of every last shred of dignity. They wanted her auctioned to fate. Wolves, humans, merchants, hunters, all had gathered, their faces blurred in the dim glow of torchlight, their voices a cruel chant that rolled through the air like thunder itself. Curse. Exile. Dangerous. Each word spat like venom. Each word cutting deeper than any blade. Rain fell harder, running into her eyes, dripping down the curve of her jaw, stinging the open gash at her temple. She raised a trembling hand to wipe the blood away, only to smear it across her cheek. Cold rivulets traced the scars along her arms, old wounds, reminders of battles she never truly survived. Her knees wanted to buckle. Her body begged her to surrender. But she couldn't. Not tonight. Not here. Because in her arms, wrapped in the fragile circle of her trembling body, lay the only reason she was still standing at all. A wolf pup. Small, frail, and dying. Its fur, once snowy white, was matted with blood. Its breath came in shallow, fluttering gasps. Every exhale sounded like it might be the last. She clutched it tighter against her chest, shielding it from the rain, from the crowd, from the cruelty of the world itself. They would have left it to die. They would have used its suffering as entertainment. But not her. Never her. She pressed her lips to the pup's damp fur, whispering words no one could hear over the chant of the mob. Words of comfort. Words of defiance. Words she barely believed herself, but needed to speak anyway. Her heart hammered in her chest, each beat screaming one simple truth: she couldn't let go. She couldn't walk away. She couldn't abandon this small life, even if it meant damning her own. The square seemed to tighten around her. Faces leaned in from the shadows. Torches flickered, lighting the stones in streaks of orange and black. Above, the sky split with a jagged flash of lightning, throwing her face, her scars, her hollow eyes, her blood-streaked lips, into stark relief. She knew what they saw. A broken thing. An exile. A girl marked by fire. They had branded her unworthy long ago. Cast her out, torn her from her pack, left her to fend for herself in the wilderness where the cold nights cut deeper than knives. And still, somehow, she had survived. But survival always came with a price. Now they wanted to see her break. To watch her crumble under their gaze. To drag her to the center of the square, bind her in chains, and raise her to the block like the condemned criminals of the old Roman days. Auction not for coin, but for blood. For power. For fear. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Her grip on the pup tightened. Run. The word screamed inside her head. Run. But where? There was no place left. She pressed her back to the broken column, chest heaving, eyes darting from one torchlit face to another. Every corner of the square felt like a trap. Every exit guarded. Every path lined with wolves and men ready to tear her apart. The storm above cracked again, lightning splitting the sky open in a violent blaze of white. For one instant, the marketplace looked less like stone and earth and more like a stage carved out of fire and shadow. And on that stage, she was the unwilling star. Her hands shook. Her throat tightened. Her heart, that stubborn, fragile thing, refused to stop pounding even when her body begged for rest. But she couldn't stop. She couldn't fall. Not yet. Because she wasn't just running for herself anymore. She was running for the tiny heartbeat pressed against her chest. She was running for the pup. And maybe, deep down, she was running for the part of herself she had long thought dead. The rain lashed harder, stinging her skin, soaking her hair, turning the square into a pit of mud and blood. Each drop felt like punishment. Each gust of wind whispered unworthy. Her legs trembled. Her breath came in sharp bursts. Her vision blurred. She wanted to collapse. To sink into the mud and let it swallow her whole. To disappear. But she lifted her chin instead. Because if this was the end, if this was the night she was auctioned to fate, then she would face it standing. Not crawling. Not begging. Standing. The crowd roared louder, sensing her defiance. Their voices rose in a single, merciless chant. Burn the cursed one. Auction the exile. Break her. And through the chaos, through the storm, through the hunger of every eye upon her, she whispered words not meant for them, but for the unseen, for the one still listening somewhere beyond the veil of the night. In a world where fate is auctioned, will you claim her story? Or let it be erased in the mud of the square? If her fire still burns in you, if you dare to walk with the cursed, the broken, the exiled, then stay. Don't turn away. Because her story has only begun. A breath. A pause. A silence deep enough to echo. Then, softer, almost like a plea whispered against the storm itself. Subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections, because here, even the broken are given a voice. And here, love is never auctioned to the highest bidder. It's fought for, clawed for, bled for. And tonight, you will see why. The crowd's roar had reached its breaking point, a savage tide of sound that crashed against her like waves determined to drown her. Torches flared brighter as if the storm itself fed the flames. Wolves bared their teeth, their bodies straining against the leashes of their handlers. The marketplace was no longer just a place of judgment, it had become a coliseum, hungry for blood. And then, the sound cut. Not silence, not truly. The storm still raged, the rain still fell, the torches still hissed as water struck fire. But the crowd froze as if some invisible hand had clenched around their throats. The chant died on their tongues, their fists stilled midair, their snarls withered before they could bloom. Because he had arrived. From the shadows at the far end of the square, a figure stepped forward. Tall, broad, cloaked in darkness and rain. His steps were slow, deliberate, each one echoing across the broken stones like a drumbeat announcing war. The hood of his cloak cast his face in shadow, but the faint light of the torches caught the glint of something unmistakable, scars carved across his skin, and eyes that burned with a heat no storm could extinguish. The wolves felt him first. Heads lowered. Tails tucked. Bodies trembled with an instinct far older than memory. They knew power when it entered the arena. They knew dominance when it pressed against their throats. The humans followed, their jeers collapsing into whispers. Some stepped back, their bodies bowing without permission. Others clutched their cloaks tighter as if fabric could shield them from what had just descended upon them. The air shifted. Heavy. Dense. Alive. And in the center of it all, she clutched the pup tighter, her heart hammering against her ribs, her breath trapped somewhere between awe and dread. He did not look at the crowd. He did not acknowledge their fear. His gaze, searing and unflinching, cut through the storm, through the square, through the very air itself, and landed on her. Her knees nearly gave out. Because the moment his eyes found hers, she knew. He knew her name. Not in the way strangers whisper a rumor. Not in the way enemies spit a curse. No. He spoke it without sound, lips barely moving, yet she heard it all the same. Heard it as if he had branded it into the marrow of her bones long before this night. Her name. Fallen from his mouth like an oath. The storm cracked open above, lightning splitting the sky in two, and in that moment his hood fell back. The firelight revealed him fully. A face carved in battle. Scars slashing across his jaw and temple, stories written in flesh of wars fought and survived. His mouth was set in a grim line, but his eyes, gods, his eyes, they burned like embers fanned by wind, hot enough to sear, deep enough to swallow. They were not merely looking at her. They were claiming her. The crowd shifted, restless, their fear mixing with awe. Whispers rippled, his name, his rank, his reputation. The Alpha King. The one they said had no equal, no weakness, no mercy. And he had stopped the world for her. A growl rumbled low in his chest, so deep it rattled the very stones beneath their feet. It wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. It rolled through the square like thunder reborn, a sound so primal, so absolute, that every wolf dropped to its knees. Every human trembled. Every torch flickered. The storm itself seemed to hesitate. And then, in that hush, he spoke. Mine. One word. Sharp. Rough. Final. It sliced through her chest like a blade, leaving her gasping, off balance, torn between fury and a pull she couldn't explain. She shook her head, clutching the pup tighter, heart pounding with confusion. No one had claimed her. No one ever would again. She was exile, outcast, untouchable. And yet the Alpha King had just stood before all and spoken as though fate itself had already been decided. The crowd erupted, not with jeers, not with laughter, but with something new, something raw. Shock. Unease. A ripple of disbelief spreading through them like fire through dry brush. He ignored them. His steps carried him closer, closing the distance with predatory calm. Rain slid over his shoulders, his cloak heavy with stormwater, his boots striking the stones like the hammer of judgment itself. She pressed her back harder against the column, breath shallow, eyes darting between him and the mob. Every nerve in her body screamed to run, but her legs refused. They were rooted to the ground, locked by something far stronger than fear. When he reached her, he did not offer a hand. He did not kneel, did not soften. Instead, he leaned in, close enough that she felt the heat radiating off him even through the storm. His voice, low and edged with steel, slid into her like a blade wrapped in velvet. You don't belong to them. His eyes flicked toward the crowd, then back to her. You never did. Her lips parted, words caught in her throat, but before she could speak, he reached out. His hand closed around her arm, rough, unyielding, scarred from battles she could only imagine. It wasn't tenderness. It wasn't comfort. It was possession, sharp and unrelenting. A grip that told her, and everyone watching, that she was no longer theirs to condemn. She stiffened, fire blazing through her chest at the audacity, the arrogance. She wanted to rip herself free, to spit defiance in his face. But the strange truth, the terrifying truth, was that she didn't. Because beneath the harshness of his touch, beneath the iron in his voice, there was something else. Something she hadn't felt in years. Recognition. Not pity. Not fear. Not scorn. Recognition. As if he had seen the same shadows she carried. As if he knew the same exile, the same scars. As if he had been waiting for her. The chemistry struck like lightning, jagged, wild, uncontrollable. Fear tangled with a pull she couldn't fight. Distrust warred with an ache she didn't want to name. Her heart thundered. His grip tightened. The world held its breath. And in that suspended moment, she realized something she could not unfeel. The most feared Alpha King in existence had just chosen her. The Alpha's hand burned against her arm as if forged from iron, yet the fire that ignited inside her chest was not from his touch. It was memory clawing its way back into her bones, reminding her of every scar she had ever earned, every wound her spirit carried. She could not look at him without being pulled into the shadows of her past, shadows that never let her go. Her breath shook in the hollow of her throat, a sound she tried to stifle. But he heard it. She knew he did, because his grip did not tighten nor slacken, it simply remained, steady as stone, as if he was anchoring her against the tempest raging inside. And yet nothing could anchor the storm that lived in her. She was cast back into it, the night of her exile, the night she ceased to be daughter, ceased to be wolf, ceased to be anything except the cursed flame they had branded her. She saw it as if it was unfolding again. The trial of shifting had begun under a sky swollen with stars. The air had been thick with expectation, every eye of the pack fixed on her. She had stood in the circle of firelight, skin marked with ash, the scent of sage burning in the pit before her. She remembered her heartbeat then, it had been wild, desperate, hopeful. She wanted to belong. She wanted to prove herself worthy, to feel her mother's arms and her father's approval after the shift was done. But destiny had different teeth prepared for her. When the pain began, she welcomed it. The tearing of bones, the stretching of sinew, it was meant to be sacred pain, the kind that birthed the wolf within. She had prayed for it, begged for it. Then came the fire. Not the warmth of transformation, not the glow of moon's blessing, but searing silver flames that erupted from her body like a curse. They devoured the ash markings, seared her skin until the night smelled of burnt flesh and terror. Elders shielded their eyes, children screamed. She had become light, unbearable and unnatural, a beacon of power not meant for their kind. When the blaze finally died, the silence that followed was worse than the fire. Her body trembled, bare and broken in the dirt, but no fur cloaked her. No wolf stood in her place. Only her, half human, half something else. And around her, the pack stared not with pride, but with horror. Her father's voice had been the first, cutting and sharp as steel. Unfit. Then her mother's whisper, choked by tears she would not shed in public. Dangerous. By dawn, the decree was spoken. Her fate carved in stone. Exile. The word had fallen like a blade, severing her from them all. She had begged, but no plea softened their eyes. Even the ones she had played with as a child turned away, unwilling to look upon what she had become. Her mother did not touch her. Her father did not defend her. And so she had walked from the pack with the weight of their rejection crushing every step. That night was carved into her marrow, and she had carried it through every barren mile of her exile. She remembered the forests that became her prison, the villages that cast stones when she dared step too close, the endless hunger that carved hollows into her cheeks. She had curled beneath the hollow of trees and prayed to gods she did not believe in, begged for warmth that never came, and yet still she endured. But every endurance was marked by that vow. Never again. Never again would she trust an alpha. Never again would she kneel before power, no matter its form. And now here he was. This alpha, cloaked in shadows and scars, daring to touch her, daring to speak her name like he had owned it long before she had ever met him. His grip felt less like rescue and more like claim. She wanted to tear herself free, to spit in his face, to remind him that she bowed to no king. But then the pup stirred against her chest. Its heart fluttered faintly beneath her hand, a fragile reminder of why she endured. She lowered her gaze to it, cradling its tiny frame, whispering words that cracked against her lips. Stay alive. Please, stay with me. The pup was more than a wounded creature. It was her reflection, fragile yet defiant, clinging to life when the world had already written its end. She would not abandon it. Not like she had been abandoned. And when her eyes lifted, she found his gaze still locked on her. There was no cruelty in his ember eyes. No pity either. Pity she could have spat on, cruelty she could have fought. But this was worse. Recognition. It was as if he could see through her, into her marrow, into the memories that should have been buried too deep for anyone to touch. His stare stripped her bare in ways the fire never had. And she hated him for it, because in that recognition was a truth she could not deny. He knew. Not the details, not the night, but the weight of exile. The scars of betrayal. The ache of being carved out of your own world and left to bleed in silence. She tried not to look at his scars, but her eyes betrayed her. They traced the jagged line down his cheek, the pale slice across his throat, the deep grooves carved into the back of his hands. They were not the kind of scars one earned from battle alone. They were the kind of scars you earned from surviving betrayal, from standing against the world when the world had already decided you should fall. Her chest tightened with an ache she did not want. because in him, she saw herself. And that was the most dangerous recognition of all. Her vow trembled inside her, weaker than it had ever been. She told herself it was nothing. That she would not bend. That no scar, no gaze, no alpha could undo the chains she had wrapped around her own heart. But when his hand finally released her, her skin burned where his touch had been. She stepped back, clutching the pup tighter, her voice rough as gravel. "Don't think this means I owe you." His lips curved, not into a smile, but into something sharper. "I didn't save you to be owed." The crowd still lingered, hushed, waiting for what came next. Wolves bowed their heads, humans kept their distance, yet none dared to move until he commanded it. He turned from them, his cloak dragging shadows across the stones, and with one sharp growl, the marketplace scattered. But she stood rooted, torn between the instinct to flee and the strange, magnetic pull of his presence. The rain lashed harder now, soaking through her hair, dripping into her wounds, chilling the pup against her chest. She should leave. Every muscle in her body screamed it. But his voice cut through the storm, deep and unyielding. "Come with me." It was not a request. It was command. And yet beneath the command was something that unsettled her more than power ever could. Need. Not the need of a man for a woman, not the hunger of dominance, but something older, something raw. As if he knew that her story was bound to his in ways neither of them could sever. She wanted to laugh, to spit the word no into the storm, to turn her back and vanish into the ruins as she had 1,000 times before. But the pup whimpered. Weak. Fading. And she knew that alone, she could not save it. Her heart battled itself, clawing between trust and survival, between vow and necessity. Her voice trembled when it finally escaped. "Why?" The Alpha King turned, ember eyes blazing in the darkness. His cloak shifted in the wind, revealing the breadth of his shoulders, the scars that ran like rivers across his skin. His answer was a growl laced with truth she could not bear. "Because your fate is mine as much as it is yours." The words struck her like the fire had that night, searing into her bones, unrelenting. She wanted to deny them, to reject the binding he spoke into existence. But deep within, a part of her she despised whispered what she feared most. He might be right. And so, beneath the storm, with the weight of exile still clinging to her, with the pup's fragile heartbeat fluttering against her chest, she followed him. Not because she trusted him. Not because she bowed. But because some part of her, scarred and broken, recognized him too. The storm followed them. It was as though the skies themselves refused to grant her peace, thunder rumbling overhead with every step, rain soaking into her hair, chilling her to the marrow. She clutched the pup close against her chest, feeling its frail heartbeat echo her own, both of them small and fragile beneath the weight of the Alpha's shadow as he led her away from the marketplace. His stride was relentless, his shoulders cutting through the rain like blades. He did not turn to see if she followed, though some part of her knew he was acutely aware of every step she took, every tremble in her limbs, every doubt swirling in her heart. His silence pressed against her like a second storm, heavier than the clouds, louder than the thunder. She should have fled. She should have turned back into the ruins, let the shadow swallow her whole, vanish into the nothingness she had become. But her legs carried her forward anyway, driven not by trust in him, but by the soft, uneven breaths of the pup against her chest. Alone, she could not save it. That truth was a chain, dragging her forward into a fate she wanted no part of. The path wound higher, through broken arches and crumbling steps, into the ancient bones of the city the humans had once built and wolves had bled upon. The stones whispered their history beneath her feet, slick with rain, carved by centuries of footsteps that had carried the condemned to their ends. And then she saw it. An ancient ruin carved into the hill, its great columns cracked and bowed, its altar blackened by centuries of sacrifice. A place where wolves had been bound, where chants had filled the air, where blood had soaked deep into the ground until the earth itself drank it like wine. The air thickened as she crossed the threshold, and for a moment, the storm outside seemed to silence itself. No thunder, no rain. Only stillness. Only the pulse of something older than them both, something alive in the bones of the ruin. Her breath caught. Her chest tightened. Because she felt it, power. Not her own, not his, but something vast, stretching through the stones, whispering through the cracks, echoing in her blood. She wanted to step back, to flee, but her feet refused. They carried her forward as if the ruin had claimed her, as if the stones themselves had been waiting for her return. And then she saw the carvings. They stretched along the walls, etched deep into the stone, surviving centuries of storm and fire. Wolves rendered in lines and curves, flames leaping from their bodies, chains binding their throats. At the center of it all was a figure, neither wolf nor human, but something between. Her arms stretched outward, one hand holding fire, the other holding chains. Beneath the figure, words carved in a language older than her pack, older than Rome itself. But she could read them. Somehow, she could read them, as though the ruin was whispering the meaning directly into her bones. The one with the flame will rise. She will either free the wolves or burn the world to ash. Her knees weakened, nearly buckling beneath her. The pup whimpered against her chest, and she clutched it tighter, her breaths ragged. No, the word tore from her throat, sharp and desperate. No, this isn't me. It can't be. The alpha finally turned, his ember eyes burning in the dim light of the ruin. For the first time since she had met him, there was no command in his stance, no demand in his voice. Only gravity. I've searched for this place for years, he said, voice low, the sound of stone grinding against stone. For the prophecy. For the one marked by flame. I knew it would be here, in these ruins, carved by hands that remembered what we've forgotten. I thought I would find a warrior. A monster. A king. But I found you. The last words pierced her, cutting deeper than any blade. Her lips trembled, her chest ached. You don't understand. I'm not chosen. I'm cursed. My pack cast me out. They called me dangerous, unfit. They were right. The fire, her voice broke. She shook her head violently, refusing the words carved into stone, refusing the destiny etched into her blood. It destroys everything it touches. She could still see it, the flames consuming her body, the screams of her pack as they watched, the horror in their eyes. She had not been their savior. She had been their nightmare. But the alpha stepped closer, slow and deliberate, as though approaching a wounded beast. His eyes did not leave hers, even as his hand rose to touch the scar that cut across his own cheek. Do you think I don't know what it means to be broken? He asked. His voice cracked, raw with something unguarded, something she had not expected from him. I was betrayed. Branded a traitor by those who swore loyalty to me. Cast into exile, hunted by the very wolves I bled for. These scars, he dragged his hand across them, are not marks of strength. They are reminders. I survived not because I was chosen, but because I refused to die. His words sank into her like stones sinking into water, rippling outward, colliding with the cracks in her spirit. She wanted to scream at him, to shove him back, to refuse the reflection she saw in his scars. But her voice failed her. Her body trembled, her grip on the pup tightening until it whimpered again. He stepped closer, close enough that his warmth reached through the damp chill, close enough that she could smell the smoke of his cloak, the wild earth that clung to his skin. You call it a curse, he murmured, his voice low, steady, burning like his eyes. But the prophecy doesn't lie. The flame can destroy, yes. But it can also free. The difference is you. Her heart lurched violently in her chest. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that she was more than exile, more than the fire that had marked her, more than the outcast who clutched a dying wolf pup because she knew too well what it felt like to be abandoned. But belief was a luxury she had never been allowed. She shook her head again, tears blurring the carvings on the wall, turning the prophecy into streaks of flame and shadow. You don't know me. You don't know what I've done. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that scraped against the rawest part of her. Then show me. Show me who you really are. The ruin trembled as if it had heard his words, as if the stones themselves demanded she answer. And in that moment, the vision came. It struck her like lightning, splitting her mind, blinding her eyes. She saw herself standing at the center of fire, her hair whipping like flame, her body chained by iron that glowed red from heat. Wolves surrounded her, some bowing, some snarling, some burning alive in her fire. She was both savior and destroyer, both queen and executioner. Her scream split the vision, echoing in her ears until she collapsed to her knees, the pup pressed against her chest as if it were the only anchor she had left. Her breath tore out of her lungs, ragged, frantic. She clawed at the dirt, desperate to rid herself of the vision, but it clung to her, seared into her skull. And through it all, she felt his eyes on her. Not in judgment. Not in fear. But in recognition. When she finally raised her head, rain dripping from her lashes, blood from her bitten lip, her voice was a whisper, trembling, broken. "I can't be her." The Alpha's reply was quiet, but unshakable. "You already are." The ruin shuddered under silence so heavy it felt alive. The carved prophecy loomed in firelight, dripping shadows across the broken stone. She knelt there still, the pup pressed trembling against her chest, her body racked with the vision that refused to let her go. But the silence broke. It came first as a growl, low and guttural, carried by the wind from beyond the crumbled archways. Then another. Then many. Dozens, threading together into a sound that was not of one wolf but of a pack closing in. Her blood turned to ice. The Alpha before her lifted his head, shoulders squaring, his ember eyes sharpening into flame. He heard it too. He had been waiting for it. Perhaps he had always known they would come. And then they appeared. Figures slipping from the shadows, one by one, until the ruin was crowded by their presence. Wolves with eyes like polished steel, fur bristling wet in the storm. Men cloaked in leather, swords glinting with torchlight, markings of rank burned into their skin. Rival alphas, each one radiating power, each one surrounded by the weight of his followers. And with them, things that were neither wolf nor man. Shadow beasts. Born of failed shifts, twisted remnants of wolves who had burned too long in the crucible of transformation and lost themselves to it. Their eyes glowed pale and empty, their bodies distorted, claws too long, teeth jagged like broken glass. They moved on all fours but not like wolves, more like predators dragged up from the underworld, summoned for this one purpose. The ruin held its breath, and then the accusations began. "She is cursed," one alpha spat, his voice echoing against the stone. His eyes were dark pits of rage, his hands tightening on the hilt of his blade. "The flame burns in her veins. We saw it once, and we will not see it again. Do you not remember the trial? Do you not remember the screams?" Another stepped forward, his voice heavier, colder. "The prophecy is no blessing. It is warning. She is the same as the criminals the Romans auctioned in this very place, thrown before beasts for the gods to judge. And the gods judged them guilty. So must we." Their words scraped against her skin like iron chains. Auctioned. Doomed. Condemned to perish while the world watched. She could hear the echo of the Roman markets in their voices, the chants, the jeers, the same cruel delight of a crowd that finds pleasure in another's ruin. Her chest tightened. Her throat burned. She wanted to scream at them, to beg them to stop, but her voice would have shattered under the weight of their condemnation. The Alpha beside her did not flinch. He stepped forward, cloak sweeping against the stone, his growl splitting the air. "She is under my protection." The words fell like thunder, but they did not silence the crowd. Instead, they provoked it. The wolves snarled, the beasts hissed, and the rival alphas stepped closer. "Your protection is betrayal," one snapped. "You would claim her, the cursed flame, and bring her into your kingdom? You would damn us all for the sake of a broken exile?" Another raised his torch high, casting his shadow across the altar. "If you choose her, you are no king. You are a traitor." The ruin erupted in chaos. Wolves lunged from the shadows, claws striking stone. The shadow beasts charged, their roars inhuman, their bodies tearing through the columns like splintered wood. Torches flared, blades flashed, the entire ruin collapsing into battle. She stumbled back, clutching the pup as wolves clashed with wolves, as steel clashed with claw. Pillars split and tumbled, stone raining down, sparks flying as blades struck sparks from rock. The air filled with the stench of blood, of fire, of sweat and rain. And then they came for her. 2 wolves broke from the fray, eyes locked on her, teeth bared. She turned, shielding the pup with her body, her heart slamming against her ribs. She had nothing but her bare hands, nothing but the fire she swore she would never use again. The first wolf leapt. Her scream tore from her throat as instinct ripped through her. The fire answered. Silver flame burst from her palms, wrapping the wolf midair, swallowing its body in searing light. It howled, twisting in agony, before collapsing to the stone, smoke rising from its charred fur. The second wolf halted, eyes wide, then turned and fled into the chaos. But she collapsed too. The flame drained her, every flicker ripping something from her body, leaving her trembling, gasping for breath. The pup whimpered weakly, and she held it tighter, rocking it against her chest as though her touch could protect them both from the storm. The ruin shook with the sound of battle. The alpha fought like a force of nature, his cloak in tatters, his claws dripping blood, his growl shaking the stone. He struck down wolves, shattered beasts, but the rival alphas circled him, their blades hungry for his flesh. And still their voices cut through the fight. Leave her. She is cursed. Choose her, and you betray us all. The ruin's firelight flickered across his scars, across his bloodied hands, across his burning eyes as he stood his ground. He did not answer them. His silence was answer enough. She saw it then, the truth of their words. He was not only fighting for her. He was fighting for a choice that could unravel everything he had built, every shred of loyalty he had clawed back from betrayal. And she was the cost. The blade of one rival alpha scraped across his shoulder, tearing blood from his skin. Another drove him back against the altar, their voices rising, demanding his submission. Leave her, or die with her. Her chest ached so violently she could barely breathe. She wanted to scream at him to let her go, to choose his kingdom, his people, his life. She was not worth this. She was not worth anything. But his eyes found hers through the chaos. And in them, she saw no hesitation. No doubt. No surrender. Only fire, answering hers. The cavern breathed with silence. Cool air drifted through the jagged cracks in the ceiling, where pale shafts of moonlight broke through and spilled across the rough stone floor. It was the only light here, soft and silver, falling on broken walls that had long ago been carved by water and time. She sat against the wall, shivering despite the warmth of her own skin. The battle at the ruins lingered on her body, bruises dark against her ribs, shallow cuts carved across her arms, the sting of exhaustion anchoring her to the ground. The wolf cub rested on her lap, tiny chest rising and falling in fragile rhythm, its whimper breaking the silence. He knelt before her, his massive frame bent close, hands steady as he cleaned the blood from her wounds. His claws had retracted, but the power simmered beneath his skin, barely contained. Every movement was precise, careful, though his touch was firm enough to remind her he was no ordinary man. He was alpha. He was danger. He was protection. When the wet cloth grazed her side, she winced, biting her lip. He stilled. His ember gaze lifted to her face, sharp but softened by something unspoken. He searched her expression as if waiting for permission to continue. Keep going, she whispered, voice raw from smoke and fear. He obeyed. The cavern walls hummed with the weight of things unsaid. For the first time, there was no clash of steel, no growls in the dark, no accusations carved into the air. Only the sound of water dripping from stone above, only the rise and fall of 2 uneven breaths, only the soft whimper of the pup between them. It was he who broke the silence first. My father betrayed me. The words were blunt, carved out of him like bone ripped from flesh. She blinked, startled by the sudden rawness in his voice. He didn't stop. His hands never faltered in their work, but his voice grew heavier, darker. He was Alpha before me. A man everyone feared, a man I thought invincible. But fear is not the same as loyalty. He ruled by breaking, by crushing, by bleeding his people until they bent beneath him. I swore I would never lead like that. His jaw clenched, muscles rippling across his throat. And when I rose, he tried to kill me for it. Said mercy was weakness. Said compassion would rot the pack from the inside. I had no choice. I had to. His voice caught, just for a heartbeat, before he forced it steady again. I ended him. The moonlight caught the scar across his collarbone, white against bronze skin. She realized then that it was not from battle, not from beasts, but from blood tied to his own. Her chest tightened. The truth he carried was not only wound, it was weight. Her fingers brushed the pup's fur as she whispered, almost against her will, I know betrayal too. His eyes flicked to hers, sharp and searching, urging her to continue. She drew in a trembling breath. The words tasted bitter on her tongue, but once freed, they could not be contained. They called me cursed. From the day the fire showed in me, I was no longer one of them. My own blood, my own kin, they cast me out. Not with a blade, not with mercy, but with silence. They looked at me like I was already ash. No goodbyes. No mourning. Just gone. An exile. Her voice cracked, but she refused to lower her eyes. She wanted him to see it, the fracture, the scar, the truth of her abandonment. The pup stirred, letting out a soft cry, as if echoing the pain of them both. Its small body trembled against her lap, fragile and helpless, a reminder of the shared vulnerability they had both carried far too long. He set aside the cloth and lifted his hand slowly, deliberately, as though afraid she would recoil. His knuckles brushed against her temple, pushing a lock of tangled hair from her face. His touch lingered, warm against her skin. His voice dropped to a murmur, deep and unyielding. I see you. The words stole the breath from her chest. His thumb grazed the line of her cheek, gentle, reverent, as though she were not exile, not curse, not flame, but something worth holding. His eyes locked to hers, steady and unflinching, carrying no fear, no doubt. Only truth. All of you, he continued, voice barely more than a growl. Not the curse they fear. Not the exile they abandoned. The fire they need. Her throat tightened, her heart pounding so loud it drowned the sound of dripping stone. She had spent her life being hidden, avoided, cast into shadow. And yet, in this cavern, beneath fractured moonlight, he stripped her of that invisibility and laid her bare. Her hand trembled as she lifted it, hovering in the space between them. The air thickened with unspoken words, with a pull neither of them could deny. Her fingertips brushed the back of his hand, tentative, testing, and when he did not pull away, her touch lingered. The world slowed. Their breaths tangled in the space between them. His eyes flicked down to her lips, then back to her eyes, the hesitation carved into the strength of his jaw. His hand slid from her cheek to her throat, thumb brushing against the quickening pulse there. She leaned closer, unable to stop herself. The distance between them narrowed until it was a single breath, until her lips hovered over his, until the cavern itself seemed to hold still in anticipation. The pup whimpered again, its tiny body pressed between them, but even that sound could not break the pull. Her chest rose, his fell. His mouth parted, hers tilted, and for one suspended moment, the world itself hung on the edge of that kiss. And then fear struck. Her breath caught. Her heart slammed against her ribs with violent clarity, and she jerked back, the connection breaking like glass under a hammer. No, she whispered, shaking her head, her voice trembling but sharp. I can't. Her hand fell from his, retreating to the safety of her lap, fingers curling tightly into the pup's fur as though anchoring herself to something innocent, something safe. Her chest heaved, her lungs burning with the sting of everything she had almost surrendered. His eyes burned with frustration, but not anger. He leaned back slightly, jaw clenched, his breathing hard as he fought to cage the hunger that had almost undone him. For a moment, silence stretched between them, jagged and raw. And then he spoke, his voice steady but low, like the rumble of distant thunder. "Trust me." Her gaze snapped to his. "Or leave." The words were not a threat. They were not demand. They were truth. Simple. Uncompromising. He would not chase her into the shadows if she chose to run. But neither would he bend, neither would he soften the fire he had shown her. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The choice lay before her, carved into the stone of this cavern as surely as the prophecy etched into the ruins. Trust meant surrender, a leap into fire that might burn her alive. Leaving meant chains, silence, exile carved anew into her bones. The pup whimpered again, curling deeper into her lap, and she realized with brutal clarity, she was no longer choosing for herself alone. The cavern waited, moonlight spilling silver across them, his eyes locked to hers, unyielding, unbroken. Her breath trembled. Her choice loomed. The council chamber was a hall of echoes, built from stone that remembered centuries of oaths, betrayals, and executions. Tall pillars rose into shadow, torches dripping with smoke and flame casting restless patterns across the cracked marble floor. The air was thick with anticipation, the scent of wolves and men pressed too close together, their voices low but sharp, a river of whispers waiting to turn into a storm. She stood in the center of it all, a place where judgment always fell hardest. The Alpha had brought her here, not as prisoner, not as equal, but as something in between. His hand had guided her into this place of power, heavy and protective on her back, yet he said nothing. The silence between them had been thick since the cavern, since the moment when trust had trembled and nearly shattered into desire. And now, beneath the vaulted ceiling of this hall, the silence became something else entirely, a test neither of them had chosen, yet both would be forced to face. Around them, council members lined the arc of the chamber, their cloaks heavy with rank, their eyes sharp with suspicion. Wolves in human form, their strength hidden but never gone, leaned forward in their seats. Humans stood in the outer ring, merchants and senators, priests and soldiers, their faces lit by torchlight, eager for spectacle. The scent of wet earth still clung to her, the ache of battle still thrummed in her limbs, yet here she was expected to stand tall, to face their stares as if she were not the exile they had whispered about since the ruins. And then the traitor stepped forward. A man she knew. Once, long ago, when she was still welcome among her kind, he had been near her, not as friend, not as enemy, but as shadow. His eyes had always lingered too long on her, always measuring, always hungry for what she carried. She had thought him insignificant, a name forgotten in the blur of exile. But here he was, cloaked in false loyalty, lips curved in triumph. He spoke her name. Spoke it like a curse. And with the sharpness of a blade, he revealed what she had hidden, the silver flame. The words hung in the air like blood on snow. At first there was silence, a stillness so profound it seemed the chamber itself had stopped breathing. And then, like dry grass catching fire, the whispers ignited. Witch. Curse. Her kind was auctioned once, cast to the gods for blood. The words tangled together, overlapping, sharpening, until the air filled with a chant that seemed older than this hall, older than stone, older than kings. Auction her fate. Auction her blood. Auction her fire. The memory of the Roman square came crashing back, the voices of the mob calling for her downfall, the rain mixing with her blood. And now here it was again, reborn in the mouths of wolves and men who had never seen her truth yet longed to condemn it. Her pulse hammered in her throat. Her fists curled at her sides, nails cutting into her palms. The pup was not here to remind her of innocence, of tenderness, it was only her now, alone beneath the fire of their judgment. She turned her gaze to him. The Alpha. He did not speak. His eyes burned, torn between fury and restraint. His shoulders were rigid, his jaw carved from stone, but his silence was sharper than any sword. For the first time since he had stepped from the chaos of that marketplace, he hesitated. The council saw it. The traitor saw it. And she saw it too. Her chest tightened with something far worse than fear, betrayal. The one who had whispered "I see you" now stood frozen, unable to choose. His people on one side, his desire for her on the other, and his silence spoke louder than his growl ever could. Guards moved like shadows from the edge of the chamber. Heavy hands seized her arms, forcing her down, iron shackles snapping around her wrists. She gasped, the sound breaking into anger, thrashing against their grip, but they were too many, too strong. Chains clanged as they dragged her forward, pulling her across the cracked marble like a criminal. The council roared in approval. The crowd beyond the torches swelled with whispers, their hunger for blood growing louder, closer, until it pressed against her like a noose. The traitor's smirk carved itself deeper into her mind, a mask she longed to rip away with her claws. Her gaze caught his again, the Alpha's. For a breath, she searched for him, for the fire in his eyes, for the man who had brushed hair from her face and whispered truth. But he did not move. His fists clenched at his sides, his chest rose and fell, but he did not break. And something inside her shattered. Her fury surged, not cold, not silent, but blazing. A roar built in her chest, ripped from her throat, carrying with it the pain of exile, the wound of betrayal, the unbearable ache of chains that should never have bound her. And then the silver fire answered. It erupted from her skin, from the core of her being, a surge of light and heat so violent the torches bent away from it, their flames shrinking as if cowed. The guards cried out, stumbling back, their hands seared by the sudden blaze. Chains glowed red, metal screaming against her wrists before shattering into shards that fell smoking onto the marble. Gasps tore through the chamber. For an instant, she was more than exile, more than curse. She was the prophecy itself, living flame, destroyer and savior, light and ruin. The vision she had seen etched into stone came alive, fire curling around her body without burning her, chains melting into nothing at her feet. The crowd recoiled, some shielding their faces, others whispering prayers, others calling for her death louder than before. And still he watched her. The Alpha. His face carved in shadow and flame, his eyes locked to her as though the world had narrowed to only this moment, to only her. Torn between fear, awe, and something deeper, recognition. But she did not wait for him. Not this time. Her chest rose, silver fire flickering from her breath. Her voice cut through the chaos, sharp and unyielding. You would auction my fate, she cried, the fire lacing her words, echoing against stone. Then know this, I am not yours to sell. The chamber shook with her rage, the prophecy itself clawing its way into life. And in that instant, as silver fire lit the council chamber, every mask dropped. Theirs. His. And hers. The chamber had not yet silenced after the shattering of her chains when the true horror arrived. The torches flickered, guttered, then flared unnaturally high as if devoured by a sudden breath of darkness. From the corners of the ancient hall came a sound no wolf or human wished to hear, the tearing of air itself, the shriek of claws raking reality apart. Shadow beasts, born from rot and nightmare, poured forth. Their bodies were smoke made flesh, their eyes embers buried in tar. They moved without sound until their teeth struck, until their claws scraped stone and flesh alike. The council's judgment splintered into chaos. Wolves shifted mid-scream, their bones breaking, fur erupting, voices cracking into howls of defiance. Humans scrambled for weapons, shields, prayers. The marble floor became slick with blood before the first heartbeat had finished. She stood at the heart of it, unshackled, her wrists glowing with the echo of broken chains. The mob's chant of witch and curse was drowned by something far louder. The roars of dying wolves, the screams of men, the crash of stone as pillars cracked under shadow claws. And within that storm, she knew, this was not accident. This was design. Her trial had been bait. The enemy had been waiting. Her breath caught in her chest, but fear no longer held her in its grip. She was done kneeling, done begging, done carrying the weight of exile like chains around her throat. The fire rose in her blood. Silver, searing, endless. The marble quaked under her feet. Cracks spidered out from her steps, glowing faintly as if fire itself traveled beneath the earth, answering her call. Dust rained from the high arches of the chamber as ancient stone remembered its long-buried power. And then, for the first time, she did not hold it back. Her roar shook the hall. "I am not your sacrifice." The silver flame erupted. It spiraled from her chest, her hands, her very breath, licking the walls, burning the shadows without consuming them, a holy fire that cleansed instead of destroyed. The beasts shrieked, their bodies collapsing into smoke and ash where the flame touched. Wolves turned, their fur alight with reflected glow, their eyes widening not in fear but in awe. Her voice thundered again, carrying through fire and battle, past the screams and the clash of steel. "I am your flame." The ground trembled. From deep beneath the chamber, something ancient stirred. The ruins themselves, carved by forgotten hands, raised on the blood of sacrificed wolves, awakened. The pillars cracked open, revealing veins of light running through stone like rivers of molten silver. The ceiling groaned, chains of history breaking apart as dust rained down. Statues once blind now burned with eyes of fire. Wolves fell to their knees. Even those who had spat curses at her hours ago bowed instinctively, their foreheads pressing the blood-stained marble. For in that moment they did not see exile or curse. They saw what prophecy had etched in shadow and fire centuries ago, the one with the flame. But the victory was not yet hers. From the deepest fissure of the chamber, a figure rose, not beast, not shadow, but man. Tall, cloaked in black fur, eyes darker than midnight yet rimmed with crimson glow. His presence stole the air from the hall, his aura pressing against every chest, suffocating, commanding. The Dark Alpha. Whispers of him had lingered in forgotten tales, bloodlines whispered only in fear, names never spoken near fire. He had waited, hidden, feeding on shadows, feeding on history's silence. And now he emerged, drawn not by counsel, not by trial, but by her fire. His voice rolled through the ruin, low and resonant, carrying the weight of centuries. "So. The flame has found its vessel." Her heart pounded, but she did not step back. Her fire rose, higher, fiercer, burning silver in defiance of his darkness. The council was silent now. Wolves watched from bloodied ground, their breath ragged, their faith torn between terror and awe. And then, before she could speak, before her voice could strike against shadow, he moved. Not toward her. Toward them. The ones who had shackled her. The ones who had spat witch and curse. He ripped through them like paper, his claws black lightning, his fangs sinking into throats. Their screams tore through the hall, the air thick with iron and smoke. Her breath hitched, fury boiling. Not for them, not for their betrayal, but for what his cruelty meant. He would not stop. He would tear wolves and humans alike until nothing remained but darkness. And then a hand caught hers. His. The Alpha who had hesitated, the one whose silence had cut her deeper than chains, now stood at her side. His scars burned in the glow of her fire, his eyes locked to hers, no longer torn but certain. His voice was low, steady, carrying only for her. "Then let us burn together." The words struck through her chest, not chains this time, but anchors. The fire surged higher, answering not just her rage, not just her pain, but their union. Together they moved. His claws met shadow, tearing with fury sharpened by scars. Her fire roared, searing beasts into ash, cracking the stone beneath the Dark Alpha's feet. The chamber became battlefield and altar both, screams and howls colliding, prophecy unraveling into blood and light. She felt herself breaking and becoming all at once. The girl who had hidden, who had begged, who had carried exile like a wound, was gone. In her place stood the flame, vast and terrible, a force that shook the ruins themselves. Every strike she made echoed with destiny. Every breath carried fire. Every heartbeat shattered chains, not just her own, but those of wolves bowed for centuries under fear. And yet, just when her fire rose highest, when victory tasted near, the Dark Alpha smiled. Not broken. Not burned. Smiling. His eyes glowed brighter, red bleeding into black. His voice carried through her flame like a whisper of rot. "You think this is your power?" he breathed, calm amid chaos. "You think prophecy ends with you? No. You are but the spark. The flame is yet to come." The ruins groaned. The ceiling split. Light and shadow collided as if the world itself was tearing apart. Wolves cried out, the council shrieking prayers, the ground trembling under feet that no longer trusted earth to hold. And in that instant, as her fire blazed against his darkness, the world held its breath. Victory was one step away. But fate was cruel. The hall split into black. Her fire still roared, his shadow still spread, the Alpha still held her hand. But the vision, the moment, dimmed into silence. And the story bled to darkness. Unfinished. Unclaimed. Waiting. The silence after her words stretches long enough to feel like an eternity, hanging heavy in the stillness, like ash suspended in the air after a firestorm. Her question is not for the council, not for the wolves still trembling in the shadows of collapsed stone, not even for the Alpha who is chosen to stand beside her when the world split between fear and loyalty. Her voice lingers in the marrow, in the hidden recesses of every listener's heart, as if she is speaking directly to the soul. Would you have chosen me, or feared me too? The council does not answer. Their lips press thin, eyes darting, their silence louder than accusations, louder than chains, louder than the chants that once demanded her death. Some look at her with reverence, some with terror, but none with certainty. The flames she called still dance in the ruins, silver sparks hissing against stone as if the ancient blood-soaked earth remembers every sacrifice, every betrayal, every prophecy whispered across centuries. He stands at her side, his body scarred, his chest rising and falling with the raw rhythm of battle. His hand hovers just close enough that the warmth of his skin brushes against her aura, not touching, yet tethered. His eyes, storm-dark, unflinching, never leave hers. He does not answer her aloud, but his gaze says what the others will not: I would have chosen you, even when the fire burned me alive. The shadow of the dark Alpha still looms. He does not vanish with the smoke, he lingers, eyes glinting with ancient hunger, a predator watching his prey not in defeat but in promise. His smirk cuts sharper than any blade, for he knows the war is far from ended. He knows prophecies do not close in fire, they open in it. She feels his gaze pierce her flame, as if he, too, heard her question and already crafted his own answer: I will not fear you. I will own you. Or I will destroy you. Her heart pounds, torn between the rawness of the Alpha at her side and the shadows that seek to claim her. The prophecy thrums in her blood like a chain rattling against bone: the one with the flame will either free the wolves, or burn their world to ash. Her chest rises, silver light threading through her veins as if the answer lies within her own pulse. She whispers to the fire within, I am not their sacrifice. I am their choice. And then, darkness. The vision cuts, the ruins dissolve into silence, leaving only the echo of her question pressing into the marrow of every listener who dares to breathe. Would you have chosen me, or feared me too? The world holds its breath. The flame waits. And so does she. If her journey burned through you, if her torment, her scars, her rise made your pulse quicken and your spirit ache, then do not let this flame die here. Let it live with you. Let it ignite every hidden ember of your soul. Subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections, where fire meets fate, where love is carved in blood and prophecy, where every heartbeat tells a story you will never forget. Because the flame has only begun. Would you stand with her? Or against her? The choice, now, is yours. The smoke coils through the ruins like living things, serpents of ash wrapping around broken pillars and torn banners. The battle's roar has ended, yet silence is not peace, it is suffocating, pressing against the lungs of every survivor. The wolves who remain stagger, their eyes wide, their bodies trembling, not from wounds alone but from the weight of what they witnessed: her fire, her defiance, her refusal to be sacrificed. The silver flame still lingers around her, faint now, ghost-like, as exhaustion drags through her bones. Each breath tastes of iron and soot, but she does not falter. She stands with her chin lifted, shoulders squared, as if daring the shattered council to brand her cursed again. None speak. None dare. Their fear is no longer of prophecy, it is of her. The alpha at her side does not move either. His hand brushes against her arm, the smallest touch anchoring them both. His silence is not hesitation, it is vow. The scarred weight of his presence tells her, I will not let them take you again. And yet, just when the silence begins to thicken into fragile recognition, it comes. A whisper. Low. Malevolent. Carried not by wind but by shadow. She is not the only one. The words slither through the ruins, colder than the night air, sharper than any blade. Wolves stiffen. Eyes dart into the darkness where the ruins crumble into void. The firelight flickers, as if recoiling. From the broken arches, from cracks in the earth, the voice breathes again. The true alpha has yet to rise. Her heart stutters. His jaw tightens. The council murmurs in panic, the ancient chant of fear returning, but softer now, restrained, because no one can tell whether the whisper came from beyond or from within their very bloodlines. The dark alpha's eyes glimmer once more in the smoke, a silhouette etched against ruin and flame. His smile does not falter. He does not attack. He only watches her, like a man studying the storm he plans to claim. Then he vanishes into shadow, leaving his words to coil around their throats. She feels the weight of it pressing against her spine. Not the only one. True alpha yet to rise. Prophecy unfinished. Her silver flame surges once, as if restless, as if it knows something she does not. Her breath shudders. She whispers inwardly, almost a prayer, almost a curse, if I am not the end, then I am only the beginning. Ominous drums rise, low at first, then deep, ancient, echoing like the heartbeat of the earth itself. The rhythm calls not for peace but for war, for awakening, for truths buried beneath centuries of betrayal. The sound builds, filling the night, drowning out the whispers of counsel and the ragged breath of survivors, until only one truth remains. This isn't over. The drums pound. The smoke thickens. The prophecy waits. And in the silence between each beat, the unspoken question lingers in every listener's chest. When the true alpha rises, whose side will you choose? Fade to black. Ominous silence. And then, nothing. Only the ache of wanting more. Only the demand for the next chapter. Only the fire that refuses to die. If you want the flame to burn brighter, if you want to know what happens when shadows and destiny collide, then subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections. The story is not finished. The prophecy has only begun. The drums have spoken. The question remains. Will you answer it?